Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today's video is going to be about how I made this little flying fox. He is sold, it was a commission, but I have a plan to make a couple of new ones in different colours, so just keep an eye out for that. I'll keep everyone updated. But yeah, for this video, I'm going to go through how I made it. If you'd like to know how I made the wings, I have a tutorial or a process video over on my Patreon that everyone can check out for my $5 and above tiers. And I do plan on doing a tutorial to put in my shop as well, but that won't be for a little while, I don't think. But yeah, so I'll go through the rest of the process of making this doll. So if you want to know how I made him, then keep watching. Alright, so like normal, I'm starting off with a resin cast of a sculpture I have sculpted, molded and cast in resin. So I usually sculpt it out of monster clay if I'm molding it, and then I cast it in silicone, and then I mold it in silicone, and then I cast it in resin. So this little one is obviously a bat face or a flying fox face, and I'm just colouring or painting in all of the sections that are going to be shown. So around the eyes, the nose and the mouth, using a water-based acrylic paint. So I usually prime my resin pieces before I paint anything using it's actually a canvas primer, but it works really well as a primer for resin. And I use the brand Chromacryl. It's a Australian-made water-based acrylic paint to paint all my things in. It's really nice consistency paint, that's why I like painting with it. But yeah, just have a look in your local craft store and see what kind of paints you can find. Derivian Matisse has nice paints as well, they're just a little bit more expensive. But yeah, all round a nice paint. So for this one, I am painting the eyes in, and then I'll be applying some varnish over it, which makes it glossy. I just decided to paint the flying fox eyes. They have been sculpted with a cabochon, so I can cast the glass eyes inside of the head. But for this one, I think the painting works really well because they're quite dark eyes anyway. So yeah, I thought the painting works really well. So I originally started painting just the parts that were going to be shown, but because the flying fox is going to be black, I decided to paint the whole face, just give it a quick coat of black around it, just so there's no white showing through when I apply the faux fur. This really helps when you're applying faux fur to resin pieces to paint underneath the colour of the actual fur, and that way you won't have such a bright colour showing through specifically darker colours. So just a little tip there. And it doesn't have to be a really thorough paint job. As you can see, I'm just doing a quick paint job over it, and then anything that shows through, you can sort of add the paint to it. So same deal with the feet. I have a whole casting and silicone process over on my Patreon. If you want to know how I did the whole process of these flying fox feet, it's all over on Patreon that you can find for my $5 and up tiers. You'll get access to it straight away when you pledge those tiers. But yeah, same deal. I'm just painting around all of the pieces. Because these are going to be exposed, this needs to be a bit more of a thorough paint job. There's no faux fur going to be applied to this one, so just make sure you get all in all the little nooks and crannies, and make sure the paint is applied properly. And there's just to keep an eye out on any resin that's been leaking. So sometimes I have trouble, I don't know what it is, if it's not mixed properly or if there's something wrong with the resin or something got into it or humidity. But lately I've been getting some resin pieces coming out with still wet resin or have non-cured resin, so just keep an eye out for that when you're using cast pieces, because paint won't stick to it. So yeah, something to keep an eye out. Not sure why it's doing it, maybe it's the humidity where I am. But yeah, using the same acrylic paint that I used for the face as well, and making sure it's nice and covered. Once that's all dry, I can start adding some varnish to the eyes to make them all nice and glossy. So I actually like to use nail polish. I think it works really, really well. I think it works better than some of the gloss material as well. If you apply a couple of coats, it becomes really glossy and quite a nice finish. But always test your resin for reactions when you're using things like that. Moving on to the faux fur, so I'm just cutting out some patterns, some pieces from a pattern that I've created. And this particular fox is going to be black with a rust colored neck. So I'm just cutting out the rust colored neck pieces. It's only a small piece, but I add a little bit more of length on the bottom just for that seam line. You want to add a little bit of a seam line when you're going to be sewing things on a sewing machine. So that's always something to keep in mind too. And basically using a small pair of sharp scissors to cut out the backing. I actually went and got some fabric from a store the other day and they just completely cut the pile, and I was like, no, and then there's fur everywhere, but I might go into that more in a vlog. But anyway, this is what it looks like. Nice rust colored faux fur with kind of a little black tips on the ends of it. And you can see the little pattern that I have drawn out, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut around it. Just be careful not to cut the pile of the faux fur and just cut the backing. This is why I like to use a small pair of scissors, so I can insert the blade in between the pile and just cut the backing. So moving on to the black faux fur, same deal, drawing out the rest of the pattern, adding that seam line to the neck area so I can sew it up on the sewing machine. And again, just cutting it out with the small pair of sharp scissors. The material is both very similar to each other. This one's probably a little bit more stiff than the black one, than the rust one. But yeah, the pile and the length is pretty much the same. You can see it's a nice glossy material too, so nice and realistic. And then again, just cutting out the shapes for the actual doll using a small pair of sharp scissors. Once this is cut out, I can pin it first side together. This doesn't need a lot of sewing with the sewing machine because I need to sew a lot of it by hand. So once it's been pinned together, I can sew up basically the leg area and one side of the neck area. And then I can start building the armature. So I have a whole video over on my Patreon as well on these armatures that you can get access to as well for the $5 tiers. Go into full details on how I basically create the armature out of these ball and socket armatures, and also the wings out of these bits of wire. So the wings do have wire in it. There's a full video on the whole process of making my previous bat wings, so if you want to learn how to do that, you can find it over there. I am working on a full tutorial for my shop that you can purchase as well for making these wings. So if Patreon's not really your thing, I am working on it, but very slowly because I'm trying to do it in between things. So once I've created the wings and I'm happy with the way they look, I can start sewing everything up. So this gets pretty taxing on the little fingers here. I need to buy a thimble, I think, because I poked myself many times when I'm sewing the flying fox. It's just a bit more labor inducing because it just needs a lot of strength to put the needle through the wings and the faux fur. And basically I'm sewing both sides of the faux fur onto the wings, and that's basically how I sew everything up by hand. It takes a long time, but it's really worth it in the end. I use a ladder stitch and I use a upholstery thread just so I can have that tension when I'm sewing it up and pull it and make sure it's nice and secure. But yeah, I mean, it's very labor inducing, and I've got 4 more that I'm making too, so woo! So once that's all sewn up, especially the front end, I can start gluing things together. So I start off by gluing the neck area to the head, and that way once that's nice and attached, I can start adding some polyfill to the body to bulk it out a little bit. And polyfill is just like a cushion stuffing that you can find in your local craft store. I think it works really well. I like the way it feels, and it's relatively cheap for a 1 kilogram bag. So I usually leave it to dry overnight just to make sure that everything is stuck together. So back the next day, trying to finish it off. Lots and lots of sewing. This is the last side that I need to sew, and then I can start gluing it together as well. And again, need the thimble. Poked my hands many times. They were very sore after this, and I'm pretty sure I lost a fingerprint too. So once that's all sewn up after a long time, I can attach the faux fur to the leg area as well, and that's pretty much the end of the body making. I give the legs a little bit of a trim, not too much, just to make sure I can see the actual claws underneath and give it some shape, and I also attach some faux fur to the head as well. So that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you like the video as well and this little doll. I have a whole heap of new bats that I'm working on. This one was a commission, so it is sold, and yeah, keep an eye out for the new bats. If you want to get access to a whole heap of things, you can join my Patreon, link is in the description. Thanks again for my patrons supporting me. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.